Hello there, I'm Todd Weller. Thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn served by the FileMaker team here at Cross IT. Before we dig in, remember that you have a chance to win lunch on us if you leave a comment or ask a question during the live stream. Just make sure that we have your email address so that we can contact you. All right, so today's Lunch and Learn, it's a little bit different. Normally when we're doing one of our a la carte sessions, that means we've received a question from someone in our audience or possibly from one of our clients, and we thought, hey, this would be a good topic for a Lunch and Learn that we can dig into and share some knowledge about. But today is actually a question that we came up with ourselves. As the holidays here are quickly approaching, we thought it would be a fun topic, which still provide a little bit of educational content, but be something fun as we're already thinking about Christmas and New Year's and all the other holidays that are quickly approaching here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and look at today. So you're probably wondering, why 1 million? Why am I counting to 1 million? And part of that is that with Claris FileMaker, one of the great things about this product is that it gives us the ability to solve the same problem multiple ways, depending on different constraints, whether it's time or what our skill set is, those kinds of things. So there's always multiple solutions to the same problem, and we just wanted to highlight what a couple of those different options are looking at a same problem. And so the problem that we came up with is counting to 1 million. And this actually started along a conversation of friends and colleagues that I have in the FileMaker community. We had all attended the PauseOnError conference that just occurred here back in October down in the North Hills of Georgia. And I was speaking with Tim Sambura and Thomas Makwa, and we were just talking about how we got our start in programming and different things that we did when we first got our hands on a computer. For me, it was a Commodore 64. For them, I think it might have been an Apple IIe, in elementary school or wherever it was. And one of the things we talked about was just writing a simple program to count up to 1 million, and thought, well, what are the ways that we would do that in FileMaker? So I decided to, of course, once I got back, just kind of played around with it on my own, had some fun with it, and thought I would go ahead and share, what I found, as well as the method that I used to do that. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's go ahead and dig in. As soon as I find my mouse here, there we go. All right, so the options that I'm going to look at today, which are the three that I came up with, are the looping script, using a recursive custom function, and also then the last one is using a while calculation. And just kind of see what the differences are in how we set those up. And so we're going to go ahead and start with the looping script. That's probably the most straightforward. We've looked at scripting and different things you can do a couple different times throughout our Lunch and Learns. So let's go ahead and get into our script workspace here so we can take a look. As you can see, I've already created scripts to test with, and in case something goes horribly wrong, I can always show off those. But let's go ahead and see if we can write this here from scratch. And so it obviously, because we're going to be looping through, it's going to start with a loop. So we'll just go ahead and drop that in there. Give ourselves a little bit of space. And then rather than worry about putting things into fields and stuff, we're just going to go ahead and work in the variables today. So we'll just go ahead and add a set variable. And we're just going to call this index. And then the result is the very simple index plus 1. All right, so that every time the loops through, our variable is incremented by 1, which is something that's going to, obviously make sense if we're counting up to 1 million, starting from 0. And then all we need to do here is then add our exit loop condition. All right, and typically, if you're working in, it would be, when the index is greater than or equal to 1 million. Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to point out here, there's a good chance that this is going to work. Okay, but quite a while ago, I was clued on a little fact that because variables in FileMaker are treated as text, that sometimes when you're writing conditional statements like this, when you're looking at a number, sometimes you can get some unexpected behaviors because of how it's stored as a string. So the way that you get around that is I'm just going to go ahead and cut that out of there. And then there's a function in there that's called getAsNumber. And then you just put in whatever your variable is so that you know for sure that you're comparing a number to a number. It's not necessary in every scenario, but I'm one of those people that I'm going to do it the same way every single time. So you'll see a lot of getAsNumber wrapped around a variable when I'm doing some type of whether it's an if-else statement or an exit loop condition, just to make sure that it's going to evaluate the way that I want it to be evaluated. So just a nice little tidbit there, and thank you for Thomas actually who shared that quite a while back with me. All right, so that is our loop. And then we're just going to go ahead and so that we can see the result, okay, we're going to go ahead and put in a custom dialog that's just going to display the result so that we know that we have reached 1 million. Okay, and then because I can't write a script without having an exit script step, just because it makes me sleep better at night, go ahead and add that in there. So it looks like we've got it. Go ahead and hit save, and now when I go ahead and we'll just go ahead and run the script, see how we did. And it's going to take a minute or two. Actually, not quite a minute. We'll take a few seconds here, and we see we come back with the results. So obviously, everything is working as expected. Okay, so that's good. So that is one way to do it. Now, the second method is the recursive custom function. And we've talked about custom functions here, I think earlier this year, maybe back in April, one of our Lunch and Learn sessions where we dug into custom functions. And the one advantage that custom functions have over the standard FileMaker functions is that a custom function can actually call itself. And what that allows us to do is set up a process called recursive custom functions or recursion, where you could have it essentially you write a loop because you're continuing to call that function. So what we're going to do, and this here is a little bit more complex obviously because we need to create the custom function, and then we're going to go ahead and drop it into our script to call that function. So let's go ahead and do that. For those of you that are not familiar, if you need to get to custom functions, it's under the File Manage. It's one of the options here towards the bottom, Custom Functions. Obviously, I already have a custom function in there from my testing, but we're going to go ahead and create a new one. So let's go ahead and create new, and you can see we have a place here where we can create, name the function. Can also include parameters, and then we can build the calculation that custom function then uses. All right, so the custom function, I'm going to go ahead and change the name since, like I said, I already had created one. We're just going to call this the million function. This FN in front of it is just my naming convention because I want to know when I'm looking at the list, because that function is going to show up in the list of functions as you're in your specify calculation dialog here or anywhere. And just the FN lets me know that it's one of the functions that I have added and not a standard function. Some people have different naming conventions, but this is the one that I use. So we're going to go ahead and call it a million. And I'm going to go ahead and it probably doesn't really need a parameter, or actually it does need a parameter, so let's go ahead and put that in there. And I'm again just going to go ahead and call this index, like so. And then we add the plus to go ahead and create that. And then this here's where we have to now build the function. And of course what we need to be able to do is that as the function is called, we have to make sure that it exits once we get to the result that we want. So that's going to require a case statement. Okay. And so we've got the case in there, and so if the index value is greater than equal to our 1 million, we are going to say that our result is 1 million. But if it's not, what we're going to have it do is we're actually going to have the default is to go ahead and call itself million. Okay. And then it's going to be the result of index plus 1. So what that means is that if this calls it as 0, it's obviously not 1 million, so it comes down here. It's going to add 1 and call itself again until we add up to 1 million. All right, so everything looks good there. All right. Now our script, of course, becomes much simpler because all of this looping action is actually happening within the custom function or that recursive custom function call. So really the only step that I have in my script here is just a set variable. And we'll just go ahead and call this index. Like so, where we've got our custom function reference. In fact, let me go ahead and just show you what's going on here, just so you can see that I'm not telling lies. Here in the specify calculation, if I come down here to the, I scroll a little too far, is that here are our two custom functions so that I can now reference them anywhere the specify calculation dialog is accessible. I can go ahead and call them and add them in. And so again, we're going to start with a default of 0 and then have it count up. Okay, we'll do the same thing here just so we can see the result. Up a little bit, and again put in our exit script step. All right, so now let's go ahead and run it. Okay, now you'll notice here we got a question mark, which is what I expected. So I don't know if any of you that were following along realize what happened. You want to check and make sure that the function is correct first. So let's, because we don't want to have to wait around, let's go ahead and just briefly, we'll go back in and modify that function. All right, and we'll just go ahead and make it 100 and see what happens there. So go back over here to our function, go ahead and run it. And we immediately get the result because obviously we're counting to a smaller number and it returns the result that was expected. So what happened? Okay, well, what happened there is that when you're using recursion, depending on the type of recursion that you're using, you're either allowed 50,000 or 10,000 recursive calls. So obviously we were trying to have 1 million recursive calls, which is obviously beyond that limit, at least the default limit. So what Claris has done is that they've given us a function that we're able to use to extend our recursive ability. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that function out of there for right now. And I have to go ahead and set recursion. Okay, and as you can see here from our little help that pops up, is it sets the maximum number of iterations for recursion and loops within an expression. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select that. You'll notice here that it has our expression. So we can just go ahead and put our function back in there. And just so that we know what's going on, I'm just going to go ahead and actually make it 2 million as the limit. Okay, I think that's good. Actually, I think that's way big. That's good. There we go. All right. So now we've got our value here. Okay, go ahead and Save that. Now, of course, I have to go back in here and reset our custom function. All right. So now, when I run, now we get the expected 1 million result, without the error. So just something that's important to remember. Now, of course, I'm using the set recursion to extend, but there may also be situations when you're doing an operation similar to this where you're using recursion, but should only ever be 100 or 1,000. Maybe you don't want to have it sit there for 50,000 iterations to realize that there's an error. You can actually go ahead and lower the recursive number as well, so it moves it either way from the default. So just something to keep in mind as you get into those more complex calculations and recursive calls and things like that. All right, so the last method here is the while calculation, which again is something that we've talked about about a year ago. I think I went back and looked. It actually has been longer ago than I thought. But the while calculation is something that's relatively new compared to obviously the looping and recursive techniques. That the while function was introduced in FileMaker 18. So it's been a few years, but like I said, not nearly as long. So let's go ahead and look at those. And again, the script becomes very simple again, except instead of having to write a custom function, we're able to do everything right in our set variable step. Okay. Oops. Use that as our result, and then we go ahead in here into our calculation. All right, so let's go ahead and do the type ahead. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and break this out so that we can see the different pieces that we're looking at. Oops. So if any of you are unsure of the while function, encourage you to go back and check out our previous Lunch and Learn where we dove into the while in detail. But you can see there's 4 pieces here where we can set, we can initialize some variables. Then we have again our exit condition. Then we have our logic that is going to be applied, and then we exit with whatever that result is going to be. Now, as far as while calculations go, this one's going to be very simple, where we want to initialize and start with our index or I variable equal to 0, and the condition is I less than 1. And then the logic is very simple. As you can see, this looks very similar to what we had set up as far as like the recursion and even in our looping script, where the calculation itself is just index plus 1, and then our result is the variable that was defined. Now you'll notice that there's one slight difference here, is that for the other 2 conditions we were looking at greater than or equal to, or this one here is actually less than. And the reason why is that the looping logic, which you find between this second set of brackets there, that is going to be evaluated as long as this condition is false. And so as soon as it is true, it is going to go ahead and evaluate the logic. Once it's true, then it's going to exit. I think I said that wrong. While this condition is true, it's going to evaluate, and then as soon as it becomes false, that's when it exits with the result. So that's what we want to make sure, because it happens before we actually set it to 1 less. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean by that here in just a second. All right, so that is our calculation. So everything looks good there. Just to save a little bit of time, I'm just going to go ahead and copy these 2 steps over from our previous script because I know they're going to be the same. So we can save that. Go ahead and run the while function. Okay. Again, I knew this was going to happen. Just wanted to re-emphasize we got our question mark because it couldn't return the result, and that again is the result of the recursion. That recursion applies to whether you're using a recursive function or the while function. So let's go ahead and do our edit here. Cut that out. Set recursion. Oops. All right. Okay, so we've got our result. Okay, now, just so you can see what I was talking about with the exit condition, let's go ahead and go back in. We'll just make a quick edit. I'm going to go ahead and change this to less than or equal to. Okay, so it means that, you know, as long as I is less than or equal to this value, it's going to evaluate this logic. So now when I go ahead and go in, save it, run that script again, we come up with 1,000,001. And that's where with the while function you just need to be aware of how that is evaluated so you get the exit condition in the right step to get the result that you want. Okay, so again, just wanted to emphasize that. We'll go ahead and set that back. All right, so where do we go from here? Because those are the 3 methods. But one of the main things that we want to keep in mind is one of the reasons why you would select one method over the other is how long does it take, and that goes to how you build construct your layout. Do you have multiple layouts, or do you try to have one layout with everything that has to be drawn as soon as that layout loads, stuff like that. And so FileMaker's given us a few functions that we're able to take advantage of and go ahead and see how long things take. So let's go ahead and go back. We'll edit our scripts and do that. And the way that you do that is I'm just going to go ahead and use another set variable. Call this time start. And there is a function in here is that you can get the current time in milliseconds, okay, which is the coordinated universal time to the nearest millisecond. You'll notice that this one here we can actually do microseconds, which is actually a new function that has been added with FileMaker 19.6. Not worried about that level of precision right now, so we're going to go ahead and stick with the milliseconds that I used when I originally tested this here a month ago. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that, bring it down here below my loop, rename it so we can get now the stop time. Okay, and now because FileMaker treats time as just the number of seconds from midnight, or in this case, number of milliseconds since midnight, we can do math on it very easily. So let's go ahead and update our result. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in just a couple of returns just to format it a little bit. And then, oops, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the ampersand to concatenate. And then go ahead and we'll just go ahead and take our time stop minus our time start. Okay, and of course that's in milliseconds, so we're going to go ahead and divide that by 1,000. And here's another get as function that we can use, so we can get as time and go ahead and drop that result in there as the parameter or that calculation as the parameter. Go ahead and say OK. And now let's go ahead and run our looping script to see how long that takes. It shouldn't take too long here. All right, so we counted up to 1 million and it took 8.513 milliseconds. Which is not bad, because I mean, you know, a million's a big number. Okay. So we can have a kind of a benchmark now of how long that method takes. So let's go ahead and now copy this same logic over and go ahead and add it to our custom function script. So we'll just go ahead and put that in the right spot. Go ahead and remove that one. Okay, so now we can run that version. Okay, so that one took 2.822 seconds. So we can see that obviously there is a difference going from a looping script to a recursive custom function. And let's go ahead and do that one more time with our while function. Sorry, in case you haven't figured out, I'm very much a person that's with a little bit of OCD as far as my formatting, so I like to make things look nice. So put those spaces in there in the white space so it's a little bit easier to read. And now we can go ahead and run our while function. And 2.088 milliseconds. So again, we've gained a little bit of time, not quite as much improvement over the recursive custom function, but it looks like the while calculation is going to perform the fastest for us. Okay. So those are the three options that I came up with for solving this simple little problem, you know, with the looping script, the recursive custom function, and our while calculation. And you can see that, you know, obviously there's, you know, benefits from a performance standpoint. And I actually took it one step further. I'm just going to go ahead into our, and these are just a summary of the results. What I had done is on my own laptop, which has, you know, different processor memory setup than the computer that I'm currently presenting from. So you'll see there's a little bit of a difference from, you know, what we just saw. But I went ahead and actually, you know, set it up so that I would run through each of the calculations 1,000 times and insert some results into a table that I could then get, you know, min, max, and average. And as you can see, that, you know, consistently the while function took less time than any of the other methods, and obviously the looping script, you know, took, you know, the longest amount of time by, you know, a factor of about, you know, between 5 and 6, depending on the other method. So all things that, you know, you would want to, you know, consider, you know, as you're, you know, looking at, you know, do I use a looping script? Do I use a custom function? Do I use a while function? And so that brings to the, you know, the one thing we want to talk about is that there are, you know, we've, you know, kind of, you know, looking down on the looping script as, you know, it doesn't appear to be as efficient just because it takes, you know, obviously more time. But there are still reasons why you would want to tackle a problem like this with a looping script. And the main reason why is that it's a lot easier to visualize as you're looking at it. You can see exactly what's going to be happening, and also from a debugging standpoint. You'll notice here, if I were to go ahead and go into the script debugger, it pops up and I can step through the script and I can see exactly what's happening, you know, as the, I'll go ahead and open up our data viewer, and you can see we've, you know, captured our start time there in that variable. We have our index here, and as I continue to loop through, you can see that the index is incrementing, so I know that the script is working exactly the way that I want it to work. Okay, so that is certainly an advantage because, as you will see here, I'm just going to go ahead and stop that. We don't need to go the whole way through. But if I go ahead and switch over to the custom function and do the same thing and go ahead and debug, I don't have all of those extra steps. So I come down here and say, okay, there's my start time, which it captured. But now it's just running through that recursive custom function. I have no visibility until it spits out the result. So depending on your comfort level with the custom function, this also applies with the while function because, as you know, it's also the single step. That is going to be a little bit harder to debug if it's a complex calculation and you're not getting the expected result. So that's certainly one area where having a looping script is going to be a little bit more helpful for your development because you're comfortable with it. You can debug it a lot easier compared to the others. So that's where you kind of have to balance which way do I want to go, and it may not be the same answer every time. I know that I certainly have done things different ways depending on the situation, whether it's something I need to have done very soon because the client is waiting for it, or it's some type of emergency break that we need to have addressed. Or can I put a little bit more thought into it, try to come up with that that magical, elegant solution that's just perfect? You can spend a little bit more time and maybe do it a different way there. So again, don't think you have to do things one way all of the time, but go ahead and see what's going to work best for you in that situation. So that's all that I have officially to share. So let's go ahead and say, okay, if we have any questions. All right, so which method do you prefer? Oh, boy, that's a good one. I would say probably personally, if I have the time to think about it, develop it, debug it, I would say I would probably defer to the while function method. Just because as we're always looking for ways and methods to make our solutions perform better, and as you can see from the this quick results and then the summary that we looked at, obviously the while function is going to give you better performance from that standpoint. So I would probably lean towards that method, but again, I wouldn't not consider the other two methods given the situation that I was in. If one of those is going to work better, I'm certainly going to jump on that and write a looping script if that's the best way to tackle that problem. Oh, this is a good one. Are there any methods that you didn't show? Yes, there are several methods that I can think of just off the top of my head. Obviously, I did all of the calculations here in scripts. There are ways to do similar calculations, in a field definition where you can set up, a calculation field that's going to, either auto enter or just be a regular calculation to give you that result. Is one of the methods. Another method is that, now that we're able to run JavaScript inside a web viewer, there's probably similar calculations that are going to do the same thing, where you can run this calculation inside a web viewer object to return the result. And that's a method that would be one I would consider the least, only because of my own comfort level with programming in JavaScript. That's not something that I have listed high on my list of talents, so that's not something I would consider, but somebody that knows JavaScript inside and out, that may be their preferred method. So that would certainly be another method that you could consider for tackling this problem. So we always joke as we're talking about things internally here that if you need to solve a FileMaker problem with FileMaker, there's probably 2 or 3 ways, when in actuality there's probably even more than that. So and let's see, any other questions? This is a good question given the season that we're in. Somebody has asked, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Well, I realize we're supposed to be talking about FileMaker, but this is a topic that I feel important enough that I'm going to go ahead and weigh in on it, and I would say with a resounding yes, Die Hard is a Christmas movie. If you look at the plot line of a guest at a Christmas party who is trying to stop the uninvited guests from taking over, I don't know if I've just described the plot of Die Hard or a Nutcracker. So if the Nutcracker can be a Christmas event, I'd say certainly Die Hard is as well. I know it's certainly on my list of viewing every season as it comes around. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our upcoming events. So the first upcoming event is at noon on Wednesday, January 18th. In the new year, we are going to serve our next Lunch and Learn. We're still in the planning stages, so we'll please stay tuned, and we'll announce the next topic sometime after the holidays. Also, because of the holidays, FMberg, which is the Pittsburgh FileMaker Developer Group, we take our customary midwinter break in January, so we are not meeting on the first Wednesday of January. However, the next meeting still takes place in January, and that's on Wednesday, January 25th at 7 p.m. There was a scheduling conflict on the first Wednesday of February, so this meeting has been moved 1 week earlier, so it's technically February's meeting, even though it happens that last Wednesday of January. This is a hybrid meeting, which means you have the option to attend in person or join us remotely. For details and to RSVP, please visit www.crossit.com/fmberg. So again, we thank you for tuning in today and taking time out of your busy schedule. If you like what you saw and heard, please click the thumbs up and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, we humbly ask that you do so. You can also hit the bell there in YouTube and get notified when we go live with new content. Just like today's installment, some of the content presented as part of our Lunch and Learn sessions are the result of your questions, sometimes our questions. So if you have any suggestions for a future topic, or if a specific FileMaker problem has you stumped, please submit those topics and questions by emailing us at nutshell@crossit.com. Your idea or question may be the featured topic of a future Lunch and Learn. From all of us at CrossIT, we are glad to have served you. Have a great day.